We are now live streaming, so everything you say and do is being recorded.
It's like all times for you, but we'll see. It's been broadcasting something about it. Roll call. I'm glad you can make one of us. Convenience for us. Also, I want us to call when you guys going off. My turn's up.
Most of us like
That's what my wife says.
that's why I hesitate sometimes.
Hey, look at these.
Started.
You know what getting it.
Okay, Big Jack, okay, let's get started. Welcome to the Town of Lancaster Zoning Board of Appeals meeting, November meeting. Please stand. Recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Roll call, Diane.
Mr. Castellano.
Here.
Mr. Dorenzo.
Here.
Mr. Michaeli.
Here.
Mr. Storr.
Here.
Mr. Sugg.
Here.
Mr. Tillmans.
Here.
Ms. Monticelli.
Okay, first case we're going to hear today is 67 Westwood Road. Diane, would you mind reading the legal notice, please?
Notice is hereby given of a meeting in the Zoning Board of Appeals of the Town of Lancaster to be held Thursday, November 10th at 7 p.m. local time in the Town Board Chambers in the Lancaster Town Hall, Lancaster, New York. The meeting will be recorded. Items for consideration by the Zoning Board of Appeals at this meeting are, number 1, the petition of Justin Hart, 67 Westwood Road, Lancaster, New York, for 3 variances for the purpose of constructing a pole barn with carport on premises owned by the petitioner at 67 Westwood Road, Lancaster, New York, to wit, A, a variance for the requirements of Chapter 400 zoning, Section 13, subsection C, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for constructing a pole barn 5 feet from a side lot line. Chapter 400 zoning, Section 13, subsection C, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster requires an accessory structure to be located a minimum of 15 feet from a side lot line. The petitioner therefore requests a 10-foot variance. B, a variance for the requirements of Chapter 400 zoning, Section 13, subsection C, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for constructing a 2,520 square foot pole barn with carport roof. Chapter 400 zoning, Section 13, subsection C, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster requires the maximum size for an accessory structure of 1,250 square feet. The petitioner therefore requests a 1,270 square foot variance. C, a variance from the requirements of Chapter 400 zoning, Section 13, subsection C, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for constructing a pole barn with carport roof 23 feet 4 inches tall. Chapter 400 zoning, Section 13, subsection C, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster requires the maximum building height for an accessory structure of 16 feet. The petitioner therefore requests a 7-foot, 4-inch variance.
Thank you, Diane. Do we have anyone here to speak to this petition?
For or against?
Anyone for the...
I'm Justin Hart, sorry.
You are?
Yes.
Would you mind coming up to the podium, please? Please state your name and address for the record.
Justin Hart, 67 Westwood Road, Lancaster, New York, 14086.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. If you wouldn't mind, please tell the board about your project.
Just looking to build a barn to store my stuff. My wife and I own a 37-foot camper, a couple of classic cars, some snowmobiles, tractor, vehicles, my truck or Jeep. Like to put things in there and get them out of the weather.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to tell the board?
That's about it.
Okay. We'll start the board with some questions. Mr. Tillmans.
What kind of material are you using to build the structure?
It'll be wood framed and steel outside.
Okay. Is it kind of color-wise, do you have that picked out yet? Or?
I was waiting to get the approval today.
Gotcha. Any exterior lighting on the building?
It's still, I haven't, that was, like I said, I didn't get too far until I was able to get to this point. I would imagine a couple of lights on the outside, nothing crazy.
Okay.
It's in my backyard.
No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Tillmans. Mr. Sugg.
Mr. Hart, will you be storing any other vehicles other than your own in that building?
No.
No further questions?
Thank you, Mr. Sugg. Mr. Storr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sir, do you own or run a business?
No. I work for a bank.
Perfect. You have no intention to run any commercial enterprise or anything?
No, my wife works for a bank as well. It's no business.
Awesome. Any particular reason for the 23.5-foot roof?
Yeah, the camper is 13.5 foot tall, so the overhead door has to be 14 feet to get it in.
Understandable. No further questions, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Storr. Mr. Mikely.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just curious, so why you're putting it so close to the side? Because your lot is, I think, 100 feet wide.
Both my neighbors, I'm trying to think of, on the east side, Scott and Nikki Bolander, I want to make sure we don't mess with their view in the backyard, and then Wanda, I can't pronounce her last name, it's very Polish, and Ann. I'm trying to be respectful of both of them.
Good. So what we did have, I should mention, we do have a letter from Wanda Swalak.
Good luck reading that. She speaks only Polish, so.
Well, she did.
I hope it was your daughter Ann that wrote the letter.
I think it was, and I didn't print a copy, but I have it here. She's 63 Westwood, which I believe is the one on the
West side.
west side, the right.
Yep.
And she's the one who would be impacted the most by this.
Correct, yep.
By that variance.
Yep.
She seemed to be fine with it, so I have no other questions. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Mikely. Mr. Castellano.
I don't have any further questions, but thank you for getting the letter from your neighbor. We take that very seriously here.
Sure.
On the board.
Scott and Nikki were supposed to send one, but we all have young kids, so I imagine it gets a little busy.
I don't have any other questions, Speaker.
Okay, and I have no questions either. I think that concludes the questions. Any other questions from any other board members? Hearing none, I'll look to the audience. Any questions from the audience? Any comments? Please come up to the podium, please. And state your name and address for the record.
My name is Kevin Lawrence. I'm at 229 Pavement, Lancaster, New York, 14086.
Okay, Mr. Lawrence, go ahead.
Now, where the pole, I seen the print where that was submitted. My only concern is how far from the corner of Wanda's property, where the fence is it going to go past that fence?
No, it will pass the fence. Where your property meets mine,
Yeah.
no, it won't pass there.
Good, I'm good with it.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments from the audience? Hearing none, look to the board for a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Mr. Mikely.
Whereas, here we go. Whereas the zoning board of appeals of the town of Lancaster has made the following findings, that no undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood by the granting of the area variance relief sought. that no detriment to nearby properties will be created by the granting of the area variance relief sought, that the benefit sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the area variance relief sought, that the requested area variance relief is not substantial, that the proposed area variance relief will not have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district, that the alleged difficulty is self-created, but not to the extent necessary to preclude the granting of the area variance relief sought, that this board has taken into consideration the benefit to the applicants if the variance relief sought is granted as weighed against the detriment to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood or community by such grant, that within the intent and purposes of this ordinance, the variance relief sought, if granted, is a minimum variance necessary to afford relief, and that no commercial enterprise other than those permitted by Chapter 400 of the Code of the Town of Lancaster be conducted on the premises.
Thank you, Mr. Mickley. Look for a second from the board.
I'll second.
Mr. Tillmans. Diane, roll call, please.
Mr. Castellano.
Yes.
Mr. Dorenzo.
Yes.
Mr. Michaely.
Yes.
Mr. Storr.
Yes.
Mr. Sugg.
Yes.
Mr. Tillmans.
Yes.
Sir, your variance has been approved. Please check in with the building department to move forward. Thank you. Okay. The next and final case is 3725 Bowen Road. Diane, could you please read the legal notice?
The second case considered by the Zoning Board of Appeals is that of the petition of Daniel and Tammy Santana, 3725 Bowen Road, Lancaster, New York, for one variance for the purpose of adding roof extensions to the south, north, and west sides of an existing pole barn on premises owned by the petitioners at 3725 Bowen Road, Lancaster, New York, to wit. A variance from the requirements of Chapter 400 zoning section 13 subsection C, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for adding 1,464 square feet of roof extensions to the south, north, and east sides of an existing pole barn. Chapter 400 zoning section 13 subsection C, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster requires a maximum accessory structure size of 1,250 square feet. The petitioners therefore request a 1,464 square foot variance.
Thank you, Diane. I see we're ready to speak, so go ahead, please.
Yes, gentlemen, Richard Sherwood. I'm an attorney for Mr. and Mrs. Santana, and with respect to the variance request, I'd like to just make some brief statements. There's, of course, certain criteria you employ, and one is whether or not this would affect the character of the neighborhood or be a detriment to, adversely affect the character of the neighborhood or be a detriment to adjoining properties. And we did submit, of course, an exhibit, which was the survey itself. And the survey, we, in fact, had the buildings, the two existing buildings, which would be the garage and the house, we colored those in gray. And then the cross-hatching on the garage and to the rear of the house represents the extensions of the roof on each of the three sides. And as you're aware, this involves just the roof extensions. There's not going to be any enclosed building. It's not an addition of that sort to the existing garage. In fact, if I could give a little history, my client did get the permit for the garage and put the garage up, not knowing that when he started the roof extensions that he needed a variance. And the building inspector, of course, was made aware of what was going on, and so he contacted my client and let him know that even though there's just a roof extension, that because there's poles supporting it, which are put into the ground, that it is considered to be a building, a structure, under the code for the town of Lancaster. So my client then contacted me and said, we need to do something in the nature of an application for a variance for these roof extensions. The roof extensions will serve for example, on the south side, which is nearest the swimming pool, that would serve as a patio area that's under cover in the summertime for the pool. And then they can also be used for storage of pool items in the winter and the grill and things like that. Then on the other two sides, both on the what would be the north side and at the rear on the east side, he would be able to store a snowmobile, ATV. He's got a small trailer, so you'd have space to put some things under cover to keep the snow off of them. You might wrap them or something besides, but they wouldn't be in the enclosed garage. The garage itself would only be used for vehicles, motor vehicles. My client does have a business, Dan the Tile Man. He does ceramic tile. And when this came up, he was advised by the building inspector that there was a need to address a situation that was occurring on the property, which was that his employees came to his residence and picked up the van that they use to go to the job site. And he doesn't store any materials here, but they would go to the warehouse area where they would pick up whatever tile supplies they needed for the job they were on. And the building inspector said, well, with the employees parking their cars there and taking your van truck to, pick up material and go to a job site, it makes it a business operation. It's not just you in your office in a house. So Mr. Santana then arranged to change that type of operation in terms of the pickup. He rented space at a warehouse. That's where the van is. The employees go there, pick up basically the vehicle that's used in the business, go pick up materials that they need, and then they obviously return that vehicle to the warehouse, small warehouse that space that Mr. Santana has rented, which I believe is over on Erie Street. So there's no longer the actual material van, as it were, and there's no employees leaving cars there. I think the building inspector would probably be able to confirm that this evening. Obviously, the variance is, if you look at the square footage involved under the roofs, it's a substantial variance because it extends, as we say, the structure as it's defined. The hardship, it's self-created in the sense that he and his wife want to have the storage area that they wouldn't otherwise have if they have vehicles parked in the garage. So while that's a matter that you consider, I don't think that, and it's certainly relevant, I don't think it should preclude the granting of a variance in this case because I think they have a good reason for asking for the relief from this board that would be afforded by the granting of the variance for these roof extensions. The impact it would have on the physically, well, obviously you can see, but those roof extensions. But other than that, physically, we don't believe that it impairs or adversely impacts the physical character of the area, and environmentally, it should not. Any of the drainage that comes off the roof extensions, just as it would come off the garage, will be provided for on site. The lot itself is screened from neighbors to the north, the south, and the east by plantings, trees, and so it's somewhat insulated. People on the other side across the street may be able to see it, but the Santanas live on what is a county road, as we're all aware, of Bowen Road. So there's a bit of traffic on that highway, but even from that vantage point across the street, you would see the garage and then the roof extensions. I wasn't able to put any color photographs together with the package, but if I could just pass around. Oh, and I might add, if you look at the survey, this building is more than 200 feet from the road right of way. So it's set back in, pretty deep and behind their house. But if I could just pass these three photographs.
Start with, if you wouldn't mind, give them to Mr. Tillmans and he'll work his way down.
I'll start over here. The first one is an aerial photograph that shows my client's property and the property to the south. The property to the south already has two accessory buildings on it. I know that one, the larger one, the barn, was probably grandfathered because it was built years ago. And then there is a garage building that, of about, I think 1,250 square feet, I would estimate, because it's within code. I'm not aware of whether it's larger or needed a variance, but there are two accessory buildings. And that barn is much closer to the road than even the Santana's residence. So, we have someone who has already a large building. That barn is larger than what my client is asking the variance for. In other words, the extensions on the roof together with his garage would not even be the same size as the barn that's sitting on the neighbor to the south. And also, that property, as I said, has another accessory building, being a garage. So we have that photograph, and then there are two other photographs. One of them just shows the front view of my client's house with the garage as it was constructed, and the angle the photograph was taken from, you can see the extension on what would be the north side of the garage with the posts. Those posts are going to be finished posts, and again, no enclosure, no walls. And then there's also the photograph of the neighbor's property on the road, that neighbor's property to the south of my client's. So, with respect to the variance, we're asking that the board consider the criteria, and we believe that the variance can be granted based upon the representations that have been made through the application and what we've actually described to you here tonight. Mrs. Santana is here to answer any questions. She knows more about the property. Mr. Santana is here. He's chosen to just stay where he's at, I believe.
Do you want to come up then? Wait, I'm going to ask.
So if there are any questions, the Santanas are here to answer them.
So, one question I have is, we have seen I believe it's three emails on this so far, and I'm sure we're going to hear from some neighbors. So have you had an opportunity to speak with any of your neighbors about this?
All our neighbors are terrible to us. I have to hire a separate attorney to get harassment charges. They harass us
Wait.
for everything.
Well,
So before we do that, I just want to make sure that...
No, I talked to my neighbor Carol Church across the street, and she totally agreed with that. But I don't really speak to any of the neighbors.
But before we do that, I don't think that you recorded the name and address for the record, have you?
No.
Could you please state your name and address for the record?
Tammy Santana, 3725 Bowen Road, Lancaster, 14086.
Thank you. Thank you. So you haven't spoken to neighbors about this particular project?
No, they don't talk to us. We bettered our property. We put probably $300,000 or $400,000 into our property. We worked for everything we got. I don't understand why we can't do what we want to do on our property when we pay our own taxes and pay our mortgage.
because you need a variance.
Right, I understand that, yes.
You understand?
Yes,
Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
I just also seen this guy walk out of here with a 2,600 square foot building, but no, it's just whatever. We're just here to represent ourselves
Okay,
with our
okay.
attorney.
Fair enough. Matt, this is just an extension on the garage. It does kick into the code, code kicks in then?
Yeah, the original building permit was issued for the 1,250 square foot building, and they're adding on to the square footage of it.
Okay. And then I believe Mr. Sherwood spoke to the operations and said that the building department has gone out there and noted that things have changed from before?
Right. We've noted the vehicle, the large van, is being stored at a commercial facility on Erie Street. The assistant code officials check on it periodically just to be sure, and that's where they're parking the vehicle. And, as I've offered to, I mean, in home occupation, that's a special use permit. They have a home office just for mailing purposes. I mean, we can go down that road. But as far as the vans and the vehicles, everything is at the Erie Street location.
And I just want to make sure that we were clear on that, because Mr. Sherwood did bring that up. I know we're not talking about parking of a van for this particular variance. I just want to make sure that we clarified that, that's all. At this point, I'm going to open up to the board for questions. Mr. Sugg?
Actually, I have no questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Sugg. Mr. Storr?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the big concerns I always have is commercial enterprises. You talked with Matt regarding it. I go by all the variances. I see that you're extending your driveway, you're making everything nice, big, beautiful, as you say. One of the things that I noticed you said is that you weren't aware that if you build onto something covering, that you would need a variance.
Not gonna be
I get that. My question is, you were unaware that if you were to extend onto that building, that you would need a variance?
No, I didn't know that I needed a variance for open space.
Okay.
I think open space was considered square footage of a building.
Okay.
I thought only enclosed was, considered square footage. So
Understandable.
that's the reason I started without,
Okay.
because I didn't know.
So my question was leading into, I've worked with Matt for a couple of years now. The building department's usually very clear on that. Matt, do you have anything to add? Was there any communication between the building department and the Santanas regarding this beforehand, after?
Prior to the initial building permit for the 1,250 square foot structure, there was a very large structure that was presented. We denied that permit based on the sizes. So the Santanas resubmitted a drawing that met the standard of the code. When we were made aware of the additions that were being put on the building, the overhang extensions, we did put a stop work order on the building, sent the notices out, and began the communications with the Santanas, with Mr. Sherwood. We were able to create the non-compliance form after we received the updated construction documents that reflected the work that was happening on site.
And since the stop order was applied to or given to them, notified, have you noticed, or the building department noticed, did construction stop? Because when I drove by there, from the street, it looks, when I pull over on Bowen, it looks like this is essentially done already.
I haven't noticed whether or not the code officials, the assistant code officials made reference to it. But from my understanding, we had some exterior beams installed, the posts were installed, and a portion of the truss system was installed. That's when the stop work order went out.
So after the stop work order, nothing else happened?
Yeah, if I could reference the photograph that was shared, I could verify whether or not,
It's the first one. That one, yeah.
That's pretty much the condition of it.
There was nothing on the south side, or the other side?
Nothing on the south side, but the north side, the framers were on site when I pulled up and handed the stop work order.
John Allison.
Okay. No, I know what it looks like. So you have no intention of storing any work vehicles, work saws, commercial?
We're in the warehouse.
I get that.
We have 4 motorcycles, a Corvette, 3 vehicles that they drive daily, so.
And a partridge in a pear tree.
Yeah.
Can you please state your name and address for the record?
Sure. I'm Carlina Samarco. My address is 56 Kristen Court, Lancaster, New York, 14086, and I'm my parents.
Okay.
Did you get that, Diane?
Your first name is?
Carlina, Karlena.
And your last name?
Samarco, Sammarco.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have no further questions at this time, but I might think of more.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Storr. Mr. Michaely.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Santana, you had submitted, as Matt referenced, you were on our agenda last year, I think it was last summer, for something different. I think that was...
A bigger building. We're going to build the same size building that this young man just left. And I don't think I had a chance of winning to build that size building, so I downsized, so I didn't need a variance for 1,250 feet, so I built a 1,250 feet building.
Okay, that was my next question. The existing garage that's there right now, that's 1,250 square feet? Okay,
So
to code, right. Matt, other than this and the stop work order, are there any other outstanding violations on this property that we know of?
The only other violation was operating the business from that premises,
that's
and
no longer-
the physical, I mean, whether or not the mailing address is working out of the building, you know,
Okay.
it's hard to tell. I would assume it, but, you know, again, that could be addressed through special use permit through the town board.
Okay, but there haven't been other issues?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, we received phone calls at the office, you know, following up on the complaints, and, you know, from the time that the application came in until today, there were several inquiries and phone calls on the project.
Okay. That's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Michael. Mr. Castellano?
Yeah, Mr. Santana, you said, or Mrs. Santana, you said you spoke to the neighbors across the street from your property.
yes.
They didn't seem to have a problem. You
Yeah,
did,
everybody, all my other neighbors across the street, behind me,
Right.
no one else has a problem.
did they put anything in writing? Did they take time to maybe write a letter? Did,
No.
no, they
I didn't
didn't.
even know that we could have, should have done that.
It's okay, no, I'm just, we take that very seriously here, you know, but there's nothing in writing on that. I have no further questions, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Castellano. Just to expound upon that, what we're trying to establish here is, or reinforce, is that the Zoning Board of Appeals does not want to create a problem by giving a variance. We want to make sure that we're not the reason that neighbors are arguing over something by our approval. So we generally like to make sure that those type of situations are addressed prior to coming to us, that you talk to your neighbors and make sure that we're on the same page. Similar to what the previous applicant did, he had brought something to us from his neighbor stating that they understand the project and they're in support of the project. What we've seen on this particular project is we've seen I think it's three emails that came through today, or in the last couple of days, and all of them claim to be neighbors and claim to have problems with the variance application. I'm sure that at least one or two of them are here, and we'll listen to what they have to say, but I just want to make sure that's what reinforce what Mr. Castellano was saying. That's what we're trying to make sure that we don't get in the middle of.
But if I could just say, I don't think that's part of your criteria. You could consider it, but the criteria are specific.
Absolutely, yeah.
In the code,
100%.
Under the state law.
Yeah.
And, you know, if someone voices opposition, you obviously consider it, but obviously the criteria are what are employed.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%, Mr. Sherwood.
All right, so we'll return to our seats.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
I'm sure that you'll be back up again in
Okay, all right.
if,
Maybe we'll just stay over.
at this point, we're going to open up the hearing to anybody in the audience that would like to speak.
My name is Sharon Boback. I live at 3733 Bowen Road. I guess I'm one of the terrible neighbors. Well, I need to give you a little background on this. I received a letter dated 5/6/2021 regarding the variance. The variance was pulled on 5/13/2021. The same day, Tammy Santana rode up and down Old Schoolhouse, screaming at the neighbors. She also called one of the neighbors, saying that she knows exactly what we're doing.
Because this borders on hearsay. She's talking.
No, this is all documented in the police department.
Mr. Sherwood, please, we're listening to...
We'll listen to her.
We're going to listen to what she has to say.
How can she talk about it?
We will give you a chance to speak after.
She knew people in the clerk's office and then called her sister. Later that week, on 6/24/21, Dan Santana tore down the fence of a neighbor on 3717 Bowen Road. That neighbor is here. Both these incidents were reported to the police department. On 8/6/21, I wrote a letter to Supervisor Rufino, carbon copied the whole town board, the town clerk, and the building inspector, Matt Ficcione. The letter dated August 6, 2021, was received on August 9th. In that letter, I compared 3725 Bowen Road to 3803 Bowen Road, and I'm sure you've heard many things about what goes on 3803 Bowen Road. Yes, from the road, 3725 Bowen Road looks fine, but when you go to the sides or the back, you see the trash that was brought home from the many jobs that they weren't doing the business from this address from. One windy day, we had to pick up trash from Bowen Road and Old Schoolhouse. On 6/6/22, they were extending poles on the pole barn. I called the building inspector. On 6/8, I received a call from the building inspector, and he said he shut down the job because it was not permitted from 3735 Bowen Road. This property is zoned farm and residential. I realize that the building inspector is very busy, and the amount of building going on in Lancaster by granting these variances causes more work for him. On October 12, 2022, which would have been my late husband's Tom's 77th birthday, his daughter and I were walking in the yard that he loved so much. Lo and behold, Tammy Santina came out using language that would make a truck driver blush. She accused us of taking pictures, and if everything is legal and up to code, then why are they worried about pictures? Both Tammy and Dan have lied to the building inspector. He built this huge pole barn and his lawnmower rakes hoses are stored alongside, so the people on Bowen Road and Old Schoolhouse have to deal with it. Why is he widening the driveway and putting up light poles? If not for his business, why? We know this is not going to end if this variance is granted. Please reject and restore the quality of life we used to have in the neighborhood of Bowen Road and Old Schoolhouse. At this time, I'd like to thank you for your time, and I'd like to thank Matt Ficcione for the many calls he has taken from the upset landowners on Bowen and Old Schoolhouse. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Sherwood, I'm sure you'd like to speak, if you could.
Well, ask my client a couple of questions. There seemed to be suggestion that you were building some huge pole barn, but in fact, what you put up is something less than what you had originally planned to do, correct?
Yes.
And that was because you discovered that the code required you to meet a certain standard, and you could only have 1,250 square feet for a garage or accessory building, as this is maybe referred to. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So what you had planned became smaller than what you thought you would put up. So you conform to the code, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And there's a statement that you tore down a neighbor's fence. Did you ever? Well, I'm not sure. I believe from the address, it would be the neighbor to the north.
The farm fence is all fallen down.
No, I'm talking about 3517.
I don't even know what that is.
I'm not sure which side of that would be. But in any event, whether it's on the north or south, did you ever tear somebody's fence out?
Our own. We replaced our fence.
You replaced your fence?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Oh, you replaced your own fence?
Right.
Okay. That was on your property?
Yes.
Wasn't on someone else's property? Okay. That's all I have for.
Thank you, Mr. Sherwood. It seems as if you would like to speak now.
Yes.
If you wouldn't mind, please, again, name and address for the record.
My name is Carol Abenshine. I'm at 3717 Bowen Road, next to the 3725 property. And actually, on June 24th of 2021, Mr. Santana tore a fence up that I had installed to stop the deer from entering and damaging my garden, which is in the Buffalo Niagara and Lancaster garden walks. He said that it was his property and that he had measured the property line himself. He was yelling so loud that a neighbor 300 feet away could hear him saying, F you, you effed me. I'm going to bulldoze your fence. I called the police to document it. I have a copy of the report here. And recently they have called the SPCA and the dog warden to my farm with no documentation. Yes, I have a very large barn, which you probably could have seen in that picture. It was built in 1870, and I have maintained it and continually improved it because it is a historical barn, actually, and I have a farm. I have farm animals. I was told by Mrs. Santana that they cannot sit on their back porch because they have to look at my barn. Last year, she also told me if they cannot have what they want, they will move. I have lived there for 50 years on my farm. So you can ask me any questions you would like.
I'd like to ask you a question. Do you have an objection to what they've applied to do, to put the extensions to the garage? Yes or no? And I don't mean to be, I mean, you can explain, but I'm just trying to get from everybody.
Okay.
Everybody I know has
The
issues
reason-
with this neighbor.
the only
But what are the
objection I
objections
have
about the project itself?
is the description of what it'll be used for, because the roof, I don't know what the pictures show, but the roofs are so high. There is no way that if you store anything under that, it's not going to get covered with snow. So I feel that that's kind of false.
So it's just you're questioning what the use will be?
Well,
Is the
most
structure
people-
itself offensive? Is the structure?
Is what
Is the
the-
structure itself offensive in any way to your property?
No.
Okay.
I can just tell you that some people may not be objecting because they're afraid of vengeance, because they're afraid of repercussions.
We've had objections. We've had several letters from several neighbors. We've had.
I
plenty
know
of-
that's
we've
a
had plenty of
civil
objections.
issue, but it can happen,
Mhm.
including for me. Any other? And they have been pouring concrete underneath these extensions recently.
Okay.
So they did continue.
Sure.
Ma'am, regarding, actually, never mind. Nothing at this moment.
But anyway, I do have the police report if anyone, should I give it to Mrs. Terranova?
If you want to submit it to the board, you certainly can.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else in the audience care to speak on this matter, on this application?
Joe Willanen, 11 Old Schoolhouse Road, Lancaster, 14086. I live on the south corner of Mr. and Mrs. Santana's lot, and I do not approve of this variance. It takes away from the character of the neighborhood. And Mr. Santana is a businessman. He knows that he's got to get the proper variances, proper permits. And so I think this is just a big snowball operation to get whatever he wants. And he knows that he wanted that big building out the get-go, and he's just doing what he wants to do. That's it.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any other members in the audience care to speak on this matter, on this application?
William Stachura, 19 Old Schoolhouse Road, Lancaster, New York, 14086. My concern is the use of that structure, the existing one and then the attached. Does not appear to be anything having to do with residential or agricultural, and that's the zoning for that area. I'm concerned that it'll become part of the commercial property one way or another, I'm also concerned that the sides could be put up and that all the structure is there to make it shielded. And that certainly would be going against what should be open. Because I agree with what Carol had said before, you're storing your equipment outside with the snow blowing and everything, it's not going to be sheltered. So I'm concerned that there'll be further activity there. And I do not agree with this variance.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else in the audience care to speak on this matter? Mr. Sherwood would care to speak again?
With some of the comments that were made, I would just like to say that the Santanas have represented what they want to, and explain what they want to use the food extensions for. Some people may think it's not making on things, but basically our heavy snowfall, and they may choose to cover whatever they put there. And I think the underlying concern seems to be more like, what are they really going to use those areas for? And if Mr. and Mrs. Santana were to use them for anything other than storage of personal items, for example, business equipment or supplies, I'm sure the building inspector would discover that very quickly, and my clients would find themselves in court for violating the town code, the zoning code. And he'd have to deal with, of course, a court and face those charges. They have no reason to do that because, and I think one of the people said that there used to be some, maybe some discarded items that were out behind the garage. Mr. Santana, I think, can speak to that. I asked him about that. He said, well, we always took everything out. We got rid of it. I may have put things there for a few days, but we always got rid of everything. He knows now that he's not going to do that. And of course, he followed the directions of the building inspector to stop using the property as the point of basically employees traveling from his premises, his residence, to the jobs, to the warehouse to pick up materials at job site. The business does, and then of course back. Now that's been eliminated, and he's in conformance with the code. In the type of work that Mr. Santana and his employees do, you order the material that you need, because you have to go out and estimate the job, whatever it is. You know how much material you need. You may get a little extra in case of breakage of tile, whatever. But you are using the product on the site where the work is being done. There's no storage of material for jobs because you work from job to job, you order the materials from your supplier, and you pick them up at the supplier's warehouse. In fact, he's not really storing much material, at the warehouse area that he has the van in because, again, you don't know what a customer is going to want in terms of product until you meet with them and they pick out what they want, and then Mr. Santana and his crew will install the tile. So he orders it accordingly when it comes in. That lets people know. Perhaps somebody has had experience with contractors doing that type of work, but he's not a storage facility, and he won't be a storage facility. That's not part of his business because it's the customer's desire to have certain tile that she orders from the manufacturer, and then his people pick it up with a work vehicle, from whether it's, I don't even know if Weinheimers is still in business, but some of the tile companies, because they warehouse tile, there's probably a half a dozen in the Western New York area that have pretty large warehouses for the different tile products. Because you've got Florida Tile, so you've got a Florida Tile distributor. You've got other tile distributors for different tile products. Some of it comes out of Texas. Whoever handles that has a warehouse. And if they don't have what you want in storage, then you have to tell your customer you got to wait until they order it and bring it in from wherever the manufacturing plant is. And it doesn't come to Mr. Santana and Mrs. Santana's house. It goes to their warehouse where he's required to pick it up and take it to the job. Just so we have complete understanding.
Yep.
Thank you.
Fair enough. Sure.
May I ask another question, Mr. Chair? Oh, I'm sorry, you want to come back up?
She had one more comment.
Okay.
Previously, before the business truck that didn't do business from 3725 Bowen Road, the workers came home every day, empty, broken tiles, mud, which is what you use on ceramic tile, the mesh, and all of that. The people from Bowen Road and Old Schoolhouse were forced to pick it up because it was there for days on end. The Staharas and the Wallenins can attest to that.
Ma'am, do you agree that that's not happening anymore?
Well, if you go in back of the barn and on the side of the barn, first of all, their house has a 2.5-car garage. Two-car, well, okay, sorry, a 2-car garage. Why do they need this huge storage facility? Why should we have to look at their junk? If you go in the back, you'll see what a mess the property is.
We like nice things and like to have fun, so that's really smart.
Please direct all comments to the board, not to each other.
Yeah, we don't want this to turn into it.
Will you read the other letters that were sent by the other residents of Old Schoolhouse Road?
We have read them. Yes,
Yes.
they were sent to us in our emails.
I got a quick question for Matt. Matt, if the variance is granted, can they enclose the sides? You know what I mean? Can they enclose it if the variance is granted?
Well, that permit would then need to be amended to show how the enclosures are going to happen. I mean, any change that's made to a structure, regardless of what happens, we need to permit it, verify its compliance with the code, and verify that the project is built according to the permit.
But if we gave the variance today, they'd already have the footprint, so it's just
The
making sure
footprint
that
would allow
the
the square
construction was
footage.
done according.
That's correct.
Unless there's a condition on the variance. Unless there's a condition on the variance. Could we put a condition on a variance saying that couldn't be enclosed? Because otherwise, I think we're all getting the same thing here. Once we give the variance is there, and if they enclose it and they get a permit to enclose it, they don't need another variance. Unless we condition the variance.
May I speak to that? I wasn't sure, I will hear your comment right here. But actually, my understanding is what is in the variance, my client is restricted to, if a variance is granted, to only that which the zoning board of appeals allows him to do. And I don't know if you would agree with me there, but if someone, hypothetically, were to get a variance for that and put walls up, it seems to be, by adding to the structure, they really violated the variance that was granted, because I think you can even put conditions on the variance that this variance will not, should not be construed to be approval for actually putting up walls on the building. So that, you would be assured that it would not have walls. I think it would be a violation of the variance if anybody did that. My client and everyone else was represented one thing, and then after a period of time did something else, because you changed what you represented to the ZBA
In the beginning.
In order to get the variance granted. I think, the variance doesn't cover the walls. I think it would be a violation myself. That's all.
Just to answer your question, I would defer to legal counsel for the legalities of conditioning the variance on it remaining open, because what we're asking for is a square footage size limitation on an accessory structure.
Right.
So if we were to renovate the building, or if the building were damaged or destroyed, to rebuild it, it could be rebuilt at that square footage based on the variance granted, the relief that's granted to the code.
Which is
But if
for the
there's a
size.
condition on that relief, then of course it would be binding that goes with the land. And again, I'm going to have to defer to legal.
Even though it only says that it's the roof extensions?
These are roof extensions. It's a footprint of the building. It's an addition to the building that expands the square footage.
So, and from what I'm getting from what you were saying, Mr. Sherwood, was you would not object to a variance if it was conditioned. You would not object to a condition being put on a variance that would preclude you from ever enclosing the walls.
Yeah, he understands. He would not have any objection
Any other questions or comments from the audience? Mr. Sherwood, any questions or comments, or any comments from you?
No, I don't have any questions. I would say one thing, though. I know a variance, obviously, once it's granted, travels with the land, but, so even if there was a successor property owner, that variance and the conditions would still apply to the So it wouldn't be, oh, yeah, somebody 10 years from now might put the walls, no, the variance conditions would still apply because those conditions of the variance are attached to the property itself. They don't belong just to the businesses.
Understand. Yep. Thank you.
I'm sorry for not knowing this, but was the roof going to be finished before the stop work order? Was the roof going to be finished, or is this going to be an open roof? What was your plan?
Oh, no, there'll be a roof.
Yeah, but it'll be roof. Okay.
But they have to put a roof now, so it's not open on top. But
Okay.
my client stopped construction.
And as of now, there's just one side, it's just the north side that's completed? And the plan, or I can't,
Actually,
is the back done too?
I think there's the support and the framework is up on both the north and south side. It might not be evident in those.
It doesn't say it. In this picture, it looks like
It
there's
is.
nothing on
It's on the south side.
On the north and
Yeah.
south side, there is lattice and roof, like, it might,
Trusses, yeah.
It might not be done, but
The structure.
I was there
it's
today.
there.
This is from today. I don't see anything on the,
There's walls there.
is there?
Yeah,
Okay,
because I drive by it every day.
all right.
Any other questions from the board? Hearing none, I look to the board for a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Mr. Storr.
Whereas the Zoning Board of Appeals of the Town of Lancaster has made the following findings. That an undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood by the granting of the area variance relief sought. That a detriment to nearby properties will be created by the granting of the area variance relief sought. That the benefit sought by the applicant can be achieved by some other method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the area variance relief sought. That the requested variance is substantial, and that the proposed area variance will have an adverse effect or impact on the physical and environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district. That the alleged difficulty is self-created. That this board has taken into consideration the benefit to the applicants if the variance relief sought is granted as weighted against the detriment to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood or community by such grant. That with the intent and purposes of this ordinance, the variance relief sought, if granted, strike that last line, please. That the petitioner has failed to carry the burden of establishing the strict compliance of the zoning ordinance would cause practical difficulties rendering the property unusable. That the denial of the area variance relief sought does not deprive the petitioner of the ability to attempt to construct a future project in a different manner.
Second,
I'll second.
Mr. Castellano. I will remind the board that this is a denial motion and that a affirmative vote is for a denial.
And Mr. Castellani, you seconded it?
It was seconded by Mr. Castellano.
Thank you.
Roll call vote, Diane.
Mr. Castellano?
No.
Mr. Lorenzo?
Yes.
Mr. Michaely?
No.
Mr. Storr?
Yes.
Mr. Sugg?
Yes.
Mr. Tillmans?
No.
I have 3 and 3.
But you seconded the motion and then, no?
Yes.
So it would fail. It would fail because there is not,
It is not, needs 4.
There's not 4.
Yes.
So that motion fails.
So the motion has been denied. The variance has been denied.
No, that motion was.
Oh, the motion was
failed.
denied. Sorry about that.
no.
The motion was accepted.
Yeah, the motion has failed because.
The motion failed.
Motion failed, so.
The motion failed.
There's nothing going on unless someone wants to make a different motion.
Correct.
I'm going to make a motion, and I'll say right now what it is. I'm going to make a motion the other way to approve with the condition that we'll attach a condition that the walls will never be finished.
Second on motion?
Okay.
Hang on.
And the second is?
Well, first, yeah, is there a second? I guess
He
first
did.
make the motion.
He did.
Is there a second?
Okay, so,
No, he's got to make the motion.
Whereas the zoning board of appeals of the town of Lancaster has made the following findings: that no undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood by the granting of the area variance relief sought, that no detriment to nearby properties will be created by the granting of the area variance relief sought, that the benefit sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the area variance relief sought, that the proposed area variance relief will not have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district, that the alleged difficulty is self-created but not to the extent necessary to preclude the granting of the area variance relief sought, that this board has taken into consideration the benefit to the applicant if the variance relief sought is granted as weighed against the detriment to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood or community by such grant, that within the intent and purposes of this ordinance, the variance relief sought, if granted, is the minimum variance necessary to afford relief, that no commercial enterprise other than permitted by Chapter 400 of the Code of the Town of Lancaster be conducted on the premises. I'd like to add a condition that the walls of the structure would never be finished.
no walls would be permitted from the roof extensions.
Correct.
Okay.
And that was seconded by Mr. Tillman. Roll call vote, Diane?
Mr. Castellano?
Yes.
Mr. Dorenzo?
No.
Mr. Michaely?
Yes.
Mr. Storr?
No.
Mr. Sugg?
No.
Mr. Tillmans?
Yes.
3-3.
Okay, 3-3 again, so it did not pass, so the variance is denied.
The variance has been denied. That's what we're, Emily?
Correct?
Yeah, denied.
Okay. Sir, your variance has been denied. Please get in contact with the building department to see what else you may be able to do at this point. Thank you. Any other business that we need to go over, Diane?
Nope.
Oh, yeah, right.
Thank you, Mr. Sherwood. Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Does this mean they have to take?
Second, anybody?
Second.
Aye, ayes.
This is-
Motion, and the meeting's adjourned. That was interesting.